Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Gavin at War, the World War II Diary of Lieutenant General James M. Gavin. Edited by Sorley. Narrated by Britt. Publisher's Note: in this audio edition, you will hear references to visual elements present in the print and ebook formats of the book. Forward. Here is a voice that speaks to us directly from the past. My father kept a personal diary when he was overseas in Europe with the 82nd Airborne Division from 1943 to 1945, and that diary is now shared for the first time. The diary is an unedited account, immediate, intense, and written without thought of publication. It is by no means a full account of my father's experiences during the war. Listeners looking for that should go to On to Berlin, written by my father and published in 1978. Airborne operations were an entirely new kind of warfare in 1943, and my father had a singular perspective. He combined the roles of a high-level war planner and a combat infantryman. A central fact of airborne assaults is that the commanding general is first out the door and faces the same dangers as any enlisted man once on the ground, and that makes this diary an especially valuable primary source from World War II. In addition, my father was wholly committed to the well-being of his men, and you will hear lessons in leadership embedded in his diary. Louis Sorley, Jr., USA retired, reviewed the text for clarity and chose photographs which can be found in the print and ebook versions of this book from the Army History and Education Center, AHEC, in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. This project would not have occurred without Bob Sorley's expertise and hard work. An additional thank you goes to Colonel Keith Nightingale, USA retired. He read the entire diary and strongly encouraged me to get it published. Thank you, Keith. Any proceeds from this publication go to the Army Heritage Foundation in appreciation for their role as custodian of the history of the U.S. Army. I believe my father would approve, as he was himself a lifetime student of military history and specified his papers should go to AHEC for use by historians. Chloe Gavin. A Gavin Remembrance by Walter Woods. Walter Woods was an aide to General Gavin during World War II. He wrote this letter to Gavin's daughter, Chloe, in around the year 2000. In 1942, I was 22 years old, working in the shipyard in Newport News, Virginia. Most of my friends and buddies had been drafted. Because of my defense job, I would not have been drafted. I quit my job and volunteered for service because I felt it was my duty to defend my country. I came home to Clyde, North Carolina, and went to the Haywood County Draft Board in Waynesville, North Carolina, and volunteered for service. I was inducted in the U.S. Army Infantry in October of 1942. I was sent to Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and then later to Camp Wheeler, Georgia. After 4 or 5 weeks in infantry training, a memo was posted on the bulletin board asking for volunteers for the Airborne Parachute School. I went to the headquarters orderly room with several other soldiers and took the test and examination for the Airborne. I passed the test and was sent to Fort Benning, Georgia to parachute school. After 4 weeks of training, which included 5 parachute jumps, I was qualified to become a paratrooper. I was assigned to a base in Phoenix City, Alabama for approximately 2 or 3 weeks. I left there for Camp Shanks, New York, for deportation to North Africa. I left New York by boat to Casablanca, Africa, where I was assigned to the 82nd Airborne Division, 505, Parachute Infantry Regiment, Headquarters Company. Colonel Gavin, at that time, was commanding officer of the 505th Regiment. After being there for about 2 months, we jumped in the invasion of Sicily. They were all inland jumps. I did not know Colonel Gavin at this time. General Ridgway was the commanding officer of the 82nd Division. The only thing I knew about Colonel Gavin was that he was the commanding officer of the 505th, known as Slim Jim. We were there about 5 weeks. After the battle in Sicily, we went back to Africa for about 2 weeks to prepare for the invasion of Italy. We jumped around the middle of August in 1943. The next morning, after I jumped in Italy, the acting commanding officer called me to the field, which was set up for headquarters. Colonel Gavin had requested that I come to see him. I did not know him personally or had not spoken to him at this time. I do not know why I was chosen for the special duty I was assigned. When I went to see Colonel Gavin, he said, "I am Colonel Gavin, your commanding officer." I saluted him, and he said, "At ease." He asked how many rounds of ammunition I had, if I had 250 rounds. He said we are going on patrol, and he wanted me to accompany him as a point guide, which included myself, Colonel Gavin, and about 6 or 8 soldiers and 2 officers. I cannot recall their names except one was Captain Olson. We left around 8 a.m. and returned around dusk. He asked me to stay and then dismissed all the other soldiers. They then returned to their regular duties. After this, he asked how many blankets I had. I answered 1. He said, "I have 2. You take 1," and insisted that I take the blanket. He then said, "You bed down over here, and I'll bed down over there." He pointed to a location about 10 yards away. He told me to be prepared to leave at any moment. We didn't go out that night. The next morning, at the break of day, we ate our breakfast, which consisted of sea rations, and went from one command post to another that day. We were gone all day. He said, "Son," he called me son all the time. He hardly ever called me soldier. If he did not call me son, he called me Woods. "Bed down here," the position we had moved to that night. The next morning, which was the 3rd day, he had a meeting with his staff, and he told me the company commander wanted to see me. The commander asked how I liked my new duties. I replied, "The colonel is about to wear me down." I was 22 years old. I asked, "Do I have to do this job?" The commander said, "The colonel has requested you to do this job," and said, "You don't have to, but we can make you wish you had." I reported to Colonel Gavin, and from that day on I was assigned to him personally for whatever he wanted me to do. He was a father figure to me, and this became a father and son relationship. We fought battles together. He talked about his personal life to me and about life in general. From that period, we went on to Italy. We went from front lines post to post, regardless of how rough it was. He visited the front lines every day, and I was with him every day. He was promoted from colonel to brigadier general in 1943 and went from 505 to headquarters company of the 82nd. He was promoted to assistant division commander. He was in the 82nd, but assigned to the 505. I was also promoted from corporal to sergeant. We were in Italy about a month. We left Valterra River right out of combat and went to Ireland by boat and stayed there a while and trained. From there, we went to Leicester, England. We still continued to visit every unit each day, although just in training. He talked personally to all soldiers he came in contact with, regardless of rank. He was loved and respected by all the troops. He did not expect us soldiers to do anything he would not do or have any better food or living conditions than he did. We left England for the invasion of Normandy. We left for the invasion about 7 or 8 o'clock on June 5th, 1944. We jumped in Normandy about 2 o'clock in the morning on June 6th. General Gavin jumped first in the string of 12 men. I jumped second, and Captain Olson jumped third. This is the way we jumped in all our jumps. We landed in Normandy, Sainte-Mère-Église. I landed in the church cemetery. He landed somewhere close to the church. I did not get in contact with him until later in the afternoon. I had the privilege of going to Europe for the 50th anniversary of the invasion of Normandy, and I was able to visit the cemetery where I landed. We started assembling the groups together as soon as possible. By mid-afternoon, we had a large group of troops together which General Gavin was commanding outpost. We were in Normandy about 2 months. From there, we went to Sicily, France, where we trained and prepared for the invasion of Holland. At this time, General Gavin was the commanding general of the 82nd Airborne Division. On Sunday, September 17th, 1944, we jumped in Holland, him first, me second, and Captain Olson third. General Gavin was a very brave man who had great faith in his men. The battle or the weather never stopped him from going to check the troops. He would go in the rain or snow. If the battle was severe, he would crawl from foxhole to foxhole to talk to his men to let them know he was with them. Words cannot explain the love and pride I had for General Gavin. In case you don't know, General Gavin, Captain Olson, and myself were wounded in the battle. This is very touching for me to tell you, as there were many things I could tell you about the battle. After each battle, the wounded and the dead were taken behind the front line. General Gavin would talk with the wounded and at times would hold their hands. For the ones that were dead, he would go from one to another and just shake his head. In Bergendal, Holland, where the picture of your father and myself was taken, which I have enclosed, it was a cool, rainy day. We had a severe battle. We won the battle and drove the Germans out of town. That was the worst battle in Holland. We lost a great number of men. After the battle, the wounded and the dead were brought back. General Gavin walked up and down the line, stood and looked for a while and said to me, "Woods, what a shame." About that time, Jack Thompson, the correspondent, walked up and talked to General Gavin. I did not know what he said. Then he took pictures of the scene. Just a short distance from there, he took the picture of your father and me. Our last mission was the Battle of the Bulge in Belgium. The weather was the worst of any battle we were in. Snow was 4 or 5 feet deep. General Gavin, at this time, was in command of all troops. It was a very unorganized front. General Gavin took over command and soon had all forces under control. As you probably know, he was wounded in the Bulge. That did not stop him from going to all units on the front line. I was also wounded, but I still went with him, except one day. We were going to one of the outposts. I was in front of him and got in too far in the enemy line. We got pinned down from German fire and had to fight our way out and went on to the right place. The only time that he ever said anything to me was the next morning. "Woods, you are getting too brave. You're going to get us killed. I think you should stay at the command post for a few days." I stayed that day. The next morning at daybreak, he said, "Woods, let's go." So that was the first and last time he ever said anything to me about it. From then on, we were out and going every day. If you have the book Gavin, the pictures after page 40 of the 4 people in the Jeep are your father in the right front, Sergeant Landers as the driver, in the back seat Captain Olson on the right, and me in the left with the rifle. In the book On to Berlin, the pictures of the dead and barely alive, I was there and saw this. Also, I am mentioned in this and several other books. In our spare time together, he would ask me if I had written home or if I had heard from home. That was important to him, although I did not have the chance to write them very much, and although my family wrote to me, I sometimes did not get their mail. He talked to me personally. He talked so much about his daughter, Barbara. He would show me pictures of her and wrote to her often. I think I knew him as well as any, or maybe better. I think I knew him as well as anyone, or maybe better. We were having a lot of encounters with Russians. After the war was over, we returned to Sicily, France, to prepare for the move to Berlin as the honor guard. I had enough points to come home for discharge. General Gavin asked me if I would stay as his orderly, which consisted of taking care of all his personal property, which included his books, clothes, and to prepare it for the move to Berlin. The last day I was with him was when he flew to Berlin with all his belongings. When I left him in Berlin, I flew to Camp Lucky Strike in France for my return to the States. I saluted him. He shook my hand and said, "Good luck, Woods." I returned to the States and was discharged in September. Sometime after I came home, he sent me pictures and 3 citations. After serving personally more than 2 years with General Gavin, I feel very honored to have done this. The only regrets I have is I didn't keep in touch with him until he was not doing too well. I did correspond with him, and he knew I was well and doing good. There is so much to be said between the lines, I could never tell you. In this small, brief summary, I hope some of these things will give you a greater understanding of my time with your father. He was a great man. Editor's Prologue. James Gavin was a soldier through and through, tall, lean, smart, and ambitious to lead. He moved up quickly in the expanding American forces as World War II impended. Still a captain in late 1941, he was, just 3 years later, a major general in command of the storied 82nd Airborne Division, self-styled the All-Americans, with AA the centerpiece of their bold red, white, and blue shoulder patch. Noted historian Carlo D'Este got it just right. Jim Gavin was the real deal, an authentic hero whose life was marked by exemplary courage, leadership, and great accomplishment. In March 1907, Gavin was born James Ryan in New York City under difficult circumstances. His mother was a recent immigrant from Ireland, his father, whereabouts unknown. Soon after his birth, his mother placed him in the Covenant of Mercy in Brooklyn, where he remained until about the age of 2. He was then, under auspices of an entity known as the Catholic Home Bureau, put with foster parents, Martin and Mary Gavin. He was given their name and lived with them in Mount Carmel, a small town in the cold fields of eastern Pennsylvania. Orphaned before he was 2 is the way Gavin described it in an author profile many years later. When Gavin was about 10 years old, his foster parents formally adopted him. In a draft memoir written many years later, Gavin provided an explanation for his middle name of Maurice, which had not appeared on his birth certificate. I recalled very vividly the discussions that I had with my foster mother. She was the one who told me, when I was to be confirmed at the age of 12, that I was to take the name of James Maurice. When Gavin asked where Maurice came from, she said that the Catholic Home Bureau had told her to give me that name. I assumed that my mother must have so advised the Bureau, so I accepted the middle name. The Gavins were characteristic, James Gavin later wrote. Like all Irish, they were religious and hard workers. One of my earliest memories is being impressed with the need to work and to contribute to the support of the family. Education was not considered important. Martin Gavin worked as a coal miner. It was a hard life, and often dangerous one. Wages were low, so other family members were expected to work and help support their families. Gavin developed considerable sympathy for his foster father. He remembered him as kind and generous, hard-working, gentle. But, along with this, Gavin became determined not to end up as a coal miner himself. Gavin's foster mother was another matter entirely. She was a heavy drinker, eventually a full-blown alcoholic, and often beat Gavin for whatever he did or didn't do that displeased her. During such violence, Gavin's foster father would leave the house. Gavin craved his foster mother's approval and affection, but to no avail. He said later that he did not ever recall her having put her arms around him or hugging him, but he remembered the whippings she administered aplenty. In a later oral history, Gavin surprisingly gave a much more positive account of life with his foster parents. "I had a great upbringing there," he maintained. The reality, though, seems to have been, as Gavin described it to his close friend and literary agent Sterling Lord, "As a foster child, I had a very rugged upbringing." The schooling Gavin received as a youth was somewhat haphazard. Initially, he was enrolled in a Catholic elementary school, going through the first 3 grades and a semester of the 4th, then moved to the public school. In 6th grade, he returned to the Catholic school for that grade and the next, finally returning to public school, and the end of his formal education for 8th grade. Meanwhile, he was reading every book he could lay his hands on, including those he was able to borrow from a local Presbyterian church. And somewhere along the line, he had been well schooled in penmanship. As an adult, he wrote a fine hand and had a distinctive signature. The Gavins proved far from ideal foster parents. Neither could read or write, and education meant little to them. The result was that when Gavin finished the 8th grade, they pulled him out of school. That was, as far as they were concerned, all the education he needed. Now he could go to work full-time to help support the family. From the age of 6 or 7, Gavin had begun part-time work, starting as a newspaper delivery boy. By the time he was in 5th grade, at age 11, he had both morning and evening routes, and was the local agent for 3 out-of-town papers. At 13, he had cornered 2 Sunday routes and had a couple of boys working for him. He filled in what free time he had with various odd jobs. One involved hauling a neighbor's coal supply from where it was delivered at the curbside to his basement coal chute. Gavin did this, bucket by bucket, for 25 cents per ton of coal moved. Whatever he earned, Gavin recalled, he gave to his foster mother. The Irish were brought up like that. During Gavin's teen years, the situation at home grew progressively worse. Mary Gavin was frequently drunk and abusive, neglecting the home and not preparing meals, constantly quarreling with her husband. Later, Gavin would describe his boyhood as a rather harsh and severe upbringing, and it certainly was that. "It wasn't milking cows on Sunnybrook Farm," he once observed. Thirsting for more education and for a better quality of life, Gavin ran away from home early in the morning of the day he turned 17, making his way by train to New York. Virtually penniless and with only the clothes he wore, and unable to find other work, he enlisted in the Army. While he was underage at the time, some arrangements were made that enabled him to do so. Almost right away, Gavin's life, and his future prospects improved dramatically. He liked the Army from the beginning and was thankful for the educational opportunities it provided. After recruit training, he was sent to a coast artillery unit stationed at Fort Sherman in the Panama Canal Zone. There, he encountered a friendly first sergeant who took an interest in him. Plus, he gained access to an excellent post library. Soon, he was made battery clerk, and after only a few months, promoted to the rank of corporal in Battery E, 2nd Coast Artillery. One day, the first sergeant, described by Gavin as an Indian and known inevitably as Chief Williams, summoned Gavin to his orderly room. There was a memorandum posted at headquarters, he was told, and he should go up there and read it. The subject was competitive entrance examinations for enlisted men aspiring to enter West Point. Gavin took the preliminary tests, passed the physical examination, and qualified to attend an Army prep school. That school, conducted at Corozal on the Pacific side of the Canal Zone, began on September 1, 1924. Similar schools were established throughout the Army, an effective means of preparing aspiring young soldiers to gain admission to the military academy. Right away, the dozen or so students in Panama, all, like Gavin, Army enlisted men, took a comprehensive written examination, sort of a where do we stand now kind of test. Gavin's heart sank when the results were published. He had done very poorly in mathematics, never having studied algebra and the like. They kept him anyway, probably because the gaps in prior education were precisely what the prep school was designed to make up for. Gavin remembered their wonderful instructor, First Lieutenant Percy Black, describing him as a patient and intelligent gentleman. Lieutenant Black would meet with his students each morning, taking them through an hour's instruction each in algebra, geometry, English, and history. The rest of the day, they would study on their own to prepare the next day's lessons. Gavin was finding it hard going, often studying until midnight, but he stuck with it. Gavin received word in late May that he had passed the entrance examinations and would be admitted to West Point. His first sergeant immediately took him out of ranks, suggesting that he use the remaining time before reporting to West Point for further study. On July 1, 1925, Gavin entered West Point on an Army competitive appointment as a member of the class of 1929. Later, he would acknowledge the fundamental importance of that opportunity. It is fair to say that, more than anything else, West Point molded my mind and body. Meanwhile, Gavin's achievement was enthusiastically reported by his hometown newspaper, the Mount Carmel Item. From a newsboy to a cadet in the United States Military Academy at West Point, the story of the life of 18-year-old James M. Gavin, whose home is at 543 West Fig Street, Mount Carmel, reads like the sensational rise of a picturesque hero in an Algiers book. Gavin still had that clipping more than 60 years after it was published. Shortly after being sworn in, Gavin and his new classmates were taken to a conference room and issued a questionnaire. One of the first items to be entered was one's age. This posed a problem for Gavin. When he enlisted, he had entered his age as 18. Since then, a year and a half has elapsed. What to do? He put down that he was 21, a decision that later puzzled him and caused him no end of worry. The West Point academic curriculum in those days was demanding. Every cadet took the exact same subjects, the only exception being foreign language, in which there were several options, with heavy concentration on mathematics. At the end of his first plebe year, Gavin stood 249 in his class academically. The next year, he was 208. Next, after that, 192. And for the final year, he was 113. Each year he had improved his class standing. That yielded an overall standing of 185 of 299 on the graduate.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?